Hey, welcome back to the show, Total Financial Solutions, Safer Money Hour. I'm Jeff Gerard, along with your host, Arif Halaby. This is your place for news, talk, and information, AM 1220 KHTS. And we're talking about, some of the things that are happening now. I mean, certainly the landscape has changed. Certainly it affects retirees.
Yeah.
You see how the Federal Reserve has these talks of raising interest rates, but it's just really not happening. I don't see it on the horizon, and it could be a couple of years. And that puts a lot of pressure on people in a couple of different ways. And I think one of them is, for the people that are more conservative, like retirees or people nearing retirement, they tend to want to take a lot less risk. People in retirement really don't want a lot of risk at all, I would say, because I think retirees are looking for two things. When they've left the workplace, they want really a consistency in their income, because for the majority of their life, their earning life, they were receiving what? A paycheck.
Right.
And when that stops, they stop going to work. They wake up tomorrow and next month and the next month, they still want that paycheck. And where it comes from, they're kind of indifferent as long as that consistency is there. The other part is they never want to have to go back to work. Now imagine someone 10 years out of the workforce being forced to go back to work because half of their money is gone or a quarter of their money is gone due to market loss or risk. So those things I don't think are on the forefront, on the frontal lobe of a lot of people as they're building and planning for retirement. But a big challenge comes in when you get there. What do you do? For somebody retiring now, I think that challenge is greater than it was maybe 10 years ago because of the interest rate environment. Most people want to go to, with their cash in hand, a bank CD, something low risk, something where they can access it if they need to. And the rates just aren't there to support that. So I think it's putting a lot of pressure on people to do things that they normally would not have done with their retirement savings.
And it used to be, look, you would save money over your lifetime, and you were responsible for a big part of your own retirement. Social Security gave you some money, of course, but the monthly cash flow, if you saved $100,000 and your annual CD was paying you 5% interest, that means out of $100,000, you could have $5,000 per year that would be coming into your bucket.
That's right.
Come into your life. Those are monies you could spend. You could do things. Your home was usually paid off. So you received a company pension sometimes, certainly Social Security, and certainly your own savings. Those dollars would give you access to a reasonable financial stability when you were retired. Today, the interest rate environment is so low. A one-year CD is 1.2% at the most. 5 years, locking up your money for 5 years in a CD is not even 2%. It's 1.84 is the average. So you're not getting anything significant to say, I'm going to give up access and liquidity for an interest rate that doesn't even keep up with inflation, frankly. It doesn't keep up with inflation by half. So you're losing money every day, every year. How do you go backwards and survive? Well, you have to realize that when interest rates change, if you're a senior, if you're a retiree, your pension dollars, because some of the monies a pension has set aside for their retirees, is in the stock market. So I love it when some of our strongest and largest unions will protest big business and big corporations and these companies, and yet they count on those companies producing and making money and not paying high minimum wage, right? If you're an individual who is getting a paycheck from your pension or will be someday, and one of the holdings, one of the companies that your pension owns is a fast food restaurant that has a lot of minimum wage or slightly above minimum wage employees. And then those employees are now forced to make a much higher wage, which means there's less profits for the company, which means as an owner of a piece of that company, which is what your pension fund does, it owns a piece of that company, it now receives less of a profit. So that means your paycheck, either now or in the future, is going to be less because there's just less money in the bucket. Do you not understand that?
Yeah.
Whether it's a big box store like a Walmart, whether it's a restaurant like a McDonald's or a Burger King, if they have to pay large dollars out, I don't care where it goes, property taxes, whatever, and it's basically gone from the company, then how is it that they're going to pay you as a pensioner? So keep in mind that you are on the same side as these companies if you are expecting a pension from the Carpenters Union or the Motion Picture Union or IBEW, or it doesn't matter. They all have their dollars invested in very similar places. When it comes to the Federal Reserve, Where are those dollars put? Those dollars are often put in, or it affects, because the savings rates inside of that pension fund also invest in things like, not exactly, but it's called a fixed instrument, like a CD or a bond. So if interest rates are raised, if you are a borrower, it can hurt you. But if you are a lender, which is what your union pension does, it lends money to different people, different organizations, different banks, then those dollars that it lends out will receive a higher interest rate. Try to keep it simple, but that's really basically what's happening is you now become a lender on that side and you want the dollars to come in at a much higher rate.
Well, and think about that as well. I mean, everybody says, oh, we want money to be cheap, right? But when you put money in a bank or a financial institution like a credit union or a community bank, you're essentially a lender. You're putting your money in because they now take the money and they can pay you interest because they're going to go out and hopefully loan that money out. And if we think about it that way, we might want the numbers to be a little bit different because right now everybody gripes and moans about interest rates being low and, oh, they don't pay me anything. Well, now imagine a business trying to operate off of 1%, or a bank loaning you money. Oh, I wish I could borrow the money for next to nothing. Well, think about some of your auto loans that are out there. I've seen some as low as 2.49%. You think, how are they able to do that? How are they able to do that? Well, it's because the rates are so low. Something else I want to touch on is, when we're talking about pensions, a lot of them are underfunded as well. And I think I've read somewhere about 90% of the corporate pensions out there are in distress. They're underfunded, and just meaning, when they're looking for, there's a few different parts that go into it. One is that there is a contribution that comes from the company every year, and they have to put in a certain amount every year to kind of keep up with this pace so that the pension is on pace to pay you that paycheck.
Yeah.
And if part of it is at risk, or in market instruments, or in variable type of instruments where they could earn more, they could earn less, but there's a part of it that they might have to keep in a cash or cash equivalent. If those monies are not producing any type of yield, any type of return, because rates are so low right now, where do you think those dollars go so they can stay on pace? It goes back into the risk side. So there's a bunch of pressure on there, and if there's any loss, they have to fund more money. So there's kind of this, like getting back to the net sum game, where there's only so much money that is out there, and it has to be allocated in proportion in a way that it's favorable for everybody. So demanding more on one side and not giving some on the other, that's not really an equitable position for anybody. So I don't think raising rates is actually a bad thing. I think coming back up to where they normally are, in the next few years, we should start to see some settling across the board.
Yeah, here's part of the challenge. According to some of the experts, if you're looking at the raising of interest rates just by 2%, which doesn't even bring us back to where we were, 7 or 8 or 9 years ago, 10 years ago. The raising of the interest rates by 2% with the amount of national debt we have accumulated in the last, 6, 8 years, we are somewhere in the neighborhood of spending more money on interest than we do on the entire, not paying down the debt, just the basic interest-only payments, than on the entire defense budget.
Wow.
Can you, look, I get that these are trillions and billions and whatever they are, but you have to put your mind around this. The amount of money, when we hit $20 trillion of debt, which is just about more than, it is. It's more than if you've taken from George Washington to the beginning of George Bush's presidency, and you added up all of the dollars that we have spent as a government. So the Revolutionary War, now some of it we paid back, some of it we didn't. The War of 1812, when the British came and they burned the White House. Did you know that? We were invaded, the British came, they burned down the White House. The Spanish-American War, the World War I, World War II, Vietnam, all the bombs we dropped in Vietnam and Korea. The Cold War, when we built those missiles that were the size of buildings. Add up all of the money that was spent. In the first 3 years of President Obama's administration, we spent more money. Maybe you don't get the fact that this is like we are on this crash course, full speed ahead. Look, since then, we've had Republican Congresses, The first 2 years of President Obama's administration were Democrats, so you can blame everybody across the board. There's not one person. The way it works is the president creates the budget, sends it to Congress. Congress cuts and pastes and moves stuff around and sends it back. President says yes or no, and they go back and forth. And they're supposed to negotiate and come up with an agreement that everybody can live with. That's kind of the process. And it's supposed to be every year. What a pain in the tush every year, but they do it every year. So we have spent more money in the first 3 years than in the history of the United States, beginning to a prior president, right? Including Bill Clinton's, charges and Ronald Reagan's buildup of the military, and the first time we went into debt and didn't pay it off, wasn't in any of those administrations. It was even before that. And yet, today, we have double that amount of money spent. So how do you get to paying these things off? Somebody has to pay the price. Do you know that? It's probably your grandchildren that will pay the price, because it's going to take a while. It's easy. You know it. You can walk into a car dealership or into your big box store and buy your most favorite electronic equipment, automobile, $100,000 fancy car. You can do all that stuff. And the moment you walk out, you have to make payments on that thing or pay it off. So it's easy to sign your name on something for 5 or 10 years or longer payment, right? If you bought a house.
That's right. And then how does that translate to us? I mean, whether it's us at the back end of our retirement, which we hope that's not where it comes. If we're going to see any recuperation of some of these, monies that we've spent as a country in the form of taxes, meaning tax hikes coming, would you rather know at the beginning of retirement so you know how to kind of set the pace for what it might cost you? Or would you rather know at the end when it's kind of too late to go back to work, when it's, now your lifestyle maybe is affected in the sense that you have higher medical costs? All of these things really coincide, and it's almost scarier to focus on the problems, because when you're really in tune with what could be and how things could play out, and you have to start mitigating and planning around those types of things and those scenarios, that's when that realization comes in, and it's kind of scary for some people. So we just have the ostrich syndrome. I'm going to stick my head in the sand, and I'm just going to let it come. Just going to let it come. I don't care how high the tide is. I'm just going to let it come because I can't move.
And so many folks try to get to the point in their life financially where you just don't have to worry about money. And that's an easy and a wonderful place to get, and you can. But I think you also have to come to grips with the fact that in this world today, there are things that will impact and beat up your accounts. Fees, especially ones that you don't know about and you're not knowing what you're getting, are one of those. Under this new disclosure, I love it. Oh, we're supposed to disclose, and the 401ks and everybody at their work, have this huge breakdown of how much it costs, and it's all broken, and it's supposed to be simple and clean. Except it's still part of that big packet of stuff that's written on that thin onion skin they call Bible type paper, right? Where it's very thin and It's in a light gray or a tan or beige, and you just can't really completely understand it because they use big words, and they say, and see, we told you. We were told by Congress or by the state that we were supposed to notify you of all the fees and give you a breakdown, and here it is. Instead of saying, look, you got to do this, but you have to do it in English. How much do you put in? How much do I charge? How much did you make me? So I can say, I went and bought this, made some money, I like the deal. You're going to charge me $2,000 a year, and you're going to make me $8,000 a year. Okay, I'm okay with that. Maybe those numbers work. But at least you can see, yes, it's worth it, or no, it isn't. And this, rule, every time they come in with this new rule, they do it and break it down in such a way where it's confusing enough for people so that you just don't know, and you can't, never mind.
Well, because everyone's scared, or at least in those capacities, whether it's your human resources or, the company that's sponsoring the retirement plan, the company, heck, even the company that's holding the dollars in that retirement plan, they're so scared to tell you one way or the other the way something is. They'd rather just flood you with information and then let you make your own decision. Well, I don't know that that's any more helpful than helping someone arrive at a conclusion either way based on a set of facts, or ask some, deliberate questions and say, hey, you have a couple of paths here, or maybe even 3 or 4, but let's narrow it down. And that's basically where your financial team comes in, because if you don't have one of those, you're just kind of floating in the ocean of information there. And it's no wonder that people don't ever really know the crux of their workplace retirement plan. Hey, I get paid, and before that, they put money in my account, and then 10 years later, they wonder why they've put in, or they've made $20,000 in interest, and they've given the plan $25,000 in fees, and they didn't understand why their account was about the same as it was 10 years ago. They don't understand that, because it's about digging through those facts, digging through and coming to a conclusion. But a lot of people just don't do that. There's just too much to wade through, I think.
I think when you focus on what you're supposed to do when it comes to saving and planning and building for your retirement, you realize that there's those fees that can eat up some of the side. There's going to be risk. So the account can actually go down in value. You could actually lose money.
Yeah.
So even though you don't touch it, it's worth less today than it was, last month or last year. And then the third thing is going to be, well, that's nice, but what about inflation? So when we come back, I want to get into inflation. I want you to understand what it is, hopefully from a real basic scenario, and how the Federal Reserve, can that impact you? What does that mean? And maybe this can come together so that you can at least know what you're dealing with. I think everybody can make decisions. Look, I can sit down and say, it's worth it for me to spend money on this. And you might walk in and say, no, I think that hobby is silly. I'm not going to spend any money. Isn't that a wonderful thing about America, that you can make the decision on what you want to spend your time and money on? Nobody has to force you. Go to a country that's socialist, like Bernie Sanders keeps talking about. I have been to socialist countries. I have been to countries. I remember in August of 1983, when the inflation amount in Buenos Aires, Argentina, was so high that 10 million pesos is what it was called. 10 million pesos equaled 70 US dollars. They would have bills that would have 1 million. People would go out to dinner and pay with their meal prior to even getting it, because by the end of the dinner, it would be more money. That's what happened in some places where it affects people. You guys, you need to know this. Oh, that can never happen in the United States. Well, maybe not. But they subtly do things. And when we come back, we'll get into how inflation can eat up some of your thing, and an interesting story on what's valuable and what can even be stolen from you, because value can be placed on just about anything, can it? We'll come back in just a minute. I'm Arif Halaby, along with Jeff Gerard. Total Financial Solutions, Save for Money Hour. You can go to hometownstation.com, click on Total Financial Solutions, send us an email, send us a message if you have any questions. We'll be with you in just a minute. When we come back, Arif Halaby, Jeff Gerard on AM 1220 KHTS. Hey, welcome back to the show, Total Financial Solutions, Save for Money Hour. Arif Halaby, Jeff Gerard. All right, as we finish up this hour of the program, I was going to tell you a little bit about how inflation works. It isn't that complicated, but imagine for a minute if today you walk in with $100 and you can buy 100 pieces of bread. You have a big family? Jeff has a big family. He's going to feed everybody bread. Today we have bread, and we're going to eat it for maybe the next 2 or 3 days, but $100 buys you 100 pieces of bread. 1 year from today, you come in, and they say, okay, how big is your family? Same size. I have 100. I need 100 pieces of bread. They say, well, you bring out a $100 bill, and you say, I'm going to pay for it. They say, no. Today it costs $103. You're like, oh, I'm going to get 3 more pieces of bread? Nope. But what happened? Are you putting more flour in it? No. Are the bread pieces larger? Nope. So what changed? Well, simple. The person who worked behind the counter wanted a pay raise.
That's right.
The electric company had to pay its employees. They wanted a pay raise. There's more benefits. There's a higher cost of health insurance. The truck driver who comes in now has to pay higher taxes for the gasoline. And so the gasoline for the truck, the truck driver now wants a pay raise as well, because he has to buy has to buy gas for his own vehicles, wants to buy bread for his own family. And what basically happens is everybody seems to want something and need something or deserve something for a much higher number. And when they do that and the value goes up, not because there's more stuff there or it's larger things, it's just because everybody thinks the same level of work should deserve more of a product or a service at a higher rate. And it's simple, but the concept of nothing changing with the things And yet at the same time, the value of in this case, the bread actually goes down, doesn't it? Because now if you say, well, I only have $100, they say, sorry, well, you can only buy 96 pieces of bread. You say, but I thought it was 97. No, it's a compounding thing, sir.
That's right.
It's interest on interest or payments on payments, so you can only buy 96 pieces of bread. And eventually, that same $100 that you come to that is sitting under your couch or in your cupboard or whatever it is, and you keep bringing out $100 bills every single year. You go from 96 pieces of bread, maybe to 91 pieces of bread, to 84 pieces of bread, and before you know it, eventually, the same $100 does not buy as much as you thought. In fact, it buys maybe half. So how long does it take for your dollar under the current numbers to be worth half? I'm going to tell you that number. Let me do the numbers.
Well, I think it's important to remember that this very thing can actually have, two sides being pulled. So, we're talking about having to put more money out, but also you could see a decrease in perceived value of the product. What do I mean by that? When this crazy thing with the water bottles came about, we started to see a little bit less water in the bottle or a little bit smaller bottle or whatever have you, and the price went up. So just as a funny example, you can see where you're getting less than what you used to pay for that 100, but now you're paying even more. Now you have pressure on both sides. And we see that in a lot of consumer goods. And I love that you touched on the idea that the suppliers also want pay raises. That's an important thing because there are so many layers built in to some of these places where we just take it for granted. We go somewhere, we buy something, and we forget how many people were part of the process of getting that good to the store. And that can certainly, we see orange juice, milk, all that happens.
And I want to give you a trick that I think can help you become worth more to the employer so that you're not just getting your basic cost of living increase, but that the skill set that you have, the efficiency in which you do the same thing. So just because you sat in a chair for 1 year doesn't mean that you should make an extra 3%, 4%, 2% pay raise. Just because you were there, just because you breathed, an extra 365 days. Now I know, look, some of you are not going to like me for saying that. But I think if you can say, I am going to go to school, I'm going to learn more, I'm going to take classes online, I'm going to go to a mini classroom, set up online on weekends, I'm going to get better so that even though I'm sitting in this chair, I can do my work twice as fast. I can do more work in the same period of time. I can do my job and another person's job, right? So now you become more valuable to the organization, to the employer, and certainly to yourself because you're going to be doing more work each and every day, or different work, or find a better way to do things. Do you follow me on that? What I want you to do is not just exist for the next 365 days, but to do better and to thrive for the next year. So that you can go to your employer and say, it used to take me this long, but I've learned these 2 skills. I've created a shortcut. I learned this software. I've done this. And now you're going to be in a much healthier position, financially speaking, because you can come to them and say, I have done more work. Now, why is that important? Because number one, the rest of the employees probably aren't going to do that. And you now shine. You stand out as somebody who's proactive, where I don't have to tell you, hey, get up, sit down, bell rings, sit up, bell rings, go here, take your break, come back, go to the bathroom, come back, right? You're adults. But I need you to be better at your job today, not just exist at your job. Otherwise, you're not going to receive a bonus or a pay raise. Do you see me on that? I know I don't think the same way as I did when I was on the police department and just thought I should have gotten a pay raise just for being there every year, and do you know who I am and how hard I work and that story. Right? Life is different.
Totally. Yep. And that's the way a lot of people were conditioned in the past, but clearly things have changed, and I think the better that we can perform, the more profitability we can have in our position, the more profitable the employer is, and then the rest is a trickle effect.
And you become more valuable. So look, understand inflation, understand some of these basic terms of what the Federal Reserve does and doesn't do, so that you can be more informed for you and your family's future. Thanks for listening. We'll be back after the break. Your hometown station. Arif, Halaby and Jeff Gerard on AM 1220. This is KHTS.